So today what we're going to do is we're going to solve a thing called solve problems with trigonometric ratios. The first concept that we have to understand is a concept called the angle of depression or descent, right? And the second concept we have to understand is a thing called the angle of elevation or inclination. All right, we'll start with the angle of depression. The angle of depression or descent is the angle down from the horizontal to the line of sight. So every time we do this, I always end up trying to do a demonstration. So imagine your eye is level and looking along the horizon, okay? So this is the horizontal. Imagine that's your eyeball sitting at the horizontal, but what's happening is we're looking down from the horizontal. So your eye is following this line here, and we call this the line of sight. Now, you'll notice that this angle starts at the horizontal and comes down. We measure that as the angle of depression. We start at the horizontal, and then we move down to what we're looking at. And that is the angle of depression. Now, if you think about it, the angle of elevation is the opposite to the angle of depression. So that means this is the angle up from the horizontal to the line of sight. So imagine this is your horizontal, and imagine that this is your eye looking up from the horizontal to this line of sight. So in this case, we start from the horizontal and sweep upwards a certain number of degrees. And we call this one the angle of elevation. And like before, that sweeping down on our previous graph, we're going to call this the angle of depression. So remember, it sweeps down if it's the angle of depression, and it sweeps up if it's the angle of elevation. And remember, all angles are constructed from the horizontal. All right, so let's see if we can come up with a solution for this first problem that we have here today. So, Ferd stands on top of a building, okay? And he sees a chicken below at an angle of depression of 60, right? Not 60, but we want to actually write 60 degrees, okay? Ferd is 50 meters above the chicken, and he's hungry. How far is the chicken from the base of the building? In order to do these kind of questions, we have to start by, 1, creating a diagram, okay? And then 2, we're going to go and solve the problem using Sohcahtoa. All right, so let's go and construct a little picture that shows the building. So imagine this is my building, and here is Ferd standing on top of the building. And we know that from the base of the building out is a certain distance, but we know that the height of the building is 50 meters. Okay, now we know that here is our little drumstick, our chicken. Okay, here's our little chicken over here, right? And what I want to know is, what is the distance from Ferd all the way down to where that chicken is? All right, we know the following. We know that if we extend the line out here, right, that the distance, the angle along here, because they say the angle of depression is 60 degrees. Here is the interesting part. We have a right angle triangle right here. So that triangle is all we care about, right? Now, you know that this angle here is 90 degrees, right? Now, because this is 90 degrees, 60 plus 30 is 90. So that means that this angle here is 30 degrees. Okay, so we have to use the inside of our triangle to find the opposite side. Now, here's the other thing that I could do. I could also find this angle here, because this angle represents the angle of depression. But you'll notice that we have two parallel lines here. Those two parallel lines with this diagonal causes a Z pattern. And that Z pattern means that if this is 60, that means this angle down here is 60. If I have an angle of depression of 60 inside my triangle, right now I have an angle of elevation from the chicken to Ferd of 60 degrees. So now we got to use Sohcahtoa. So let's just quickly do that. So in this case, what we want is we have this side, which is, I'm going to use this as my angle. So that means this is my opposite. And then this side here is my adjacent. And I'm going to call this one X, because I don't really care to look for it, right? Or you could call it B or whatever. On the note, it might say B. Sometimes it might say X. All right. So now, Sohcahtoa tells us that we are going to use tan. So in this case, we're going to go tan of 60 degrees is equal to, well, the opposite is opposite over adjacent, which is equal to 50 over, let's call it X. And then we have tan of 60. All right, so we need to figure out what tan of 60 is. And when you punch that in your calculator, you get 1.732 is equal to 50 over X. Now, we're going to put this all over 1, and then we're going to do our cross multiplication like we always do. And then we can rewrite this as 1.732x is 50 times 1, which is just 50. And then what we can do is we can divide both sides by 1.732. And you get an answer of about 28.9. So X is 28.9, and that's meters as my final answer. And so we can say the chicken is 28.9 meters from the base of the building. Okay. Pause the video, rewatch the video if you need to, and then move on to the next question. So for this problem, Ferd decides to walk north. Okay, so what we're going to do, just like before, we're going to start by creating a picture or a diagram, and then we're going to solve using Sohcahtoa. Whether it be solving for the angle or solving for the length. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start off with Ferd. So Ferd, he's actually walking north, right? So imagine you have something like this: a north, an east, a west, and a south. And then Ferd wants to go north this way, right? But instead of moving north, going straight north, what happens is he veers off 40 degrees to the west of north. So west of north really means it goes this way, and then this is 40 degrees. Okay, so now what we could do to make our life easy is we make a nice little right angled triangle. So here is our right triangle. Okay, and here's the other part that it says. So we swept 40 degrees west of north, and we've traveled literally 4 kilometers an hour. And it says for 3 hours. So how far have you traveled in 3 hours? So the distance is 4 times 3, which is 12 kilometers. So this is 12 kilometers. All right. And now that we've got that on the distance that he travels in the wrong way to the North Pole, we have to decide how far off course was he. Okay. So when we're trying to find out how far off course, we're actually trying to find this distance here. So this distance going across from here to here. Let's call this my favorite letter, X. Okay. Now, in order to find that, you got to figure out that this part here, this part right here is our hypotenuse. So we're going to write hypotenuse there and call it a day. So now we have our hypotenuse set up. So now this part here along the top is, well, if this is 40 and this is directly across from 40 degrees, that means this is the opposite. So now let's go and take a look. So we have the opposite and we have the adjacent. No, the opposite and the hypotenuse. So the opposite and hypotenuse tells us that we're using so in Sohcahtoa, which means we can just use it right away. So in this case, we have sine of the angle 40 is equal to, well, the opposite is x over, well, the hypotenuse is 12. Now, let's say that you're a little more sophisticated than the average bear. What we can do is this. We can write this as something over 1. Don't bother changing sine of 40. And what we can do is we can cross multiply by going 1 times x is equal to, notice, the 12 goes in front of sine of 40. Now, that space in between sine and 40, between 12 and the letters and the number that we put there, means that we're going to have to do 12 times sine 40 and do our final answer and divide by 1. So I'll just show you what happens. So you get divide both sides by 1, and so you end up with, don't do any calculations. You just write 12 sine of 40, and then we divide by 1 is our answer. Now, you take 12 times sine 40, divide by 1, and that's what you get as your final answer. So on your calculator, you're going to write 12 times sine 40, and then divide by 1, get your final answer, and you end up with x being 7.7 kilometers. And then you're going to answer, therefore, Ferd was 7.7 kilometers off course. And we're done. Okay, so now you can also do it the other way where we just said, okay, did our sine 40, divide, multiply across, and divide and get our answer. You can do that. You can do this problem that way as well. Some of you guys, I've noted, can do this, so I've just showed it quickly. You can also do it this other way. And I'll put that alternate solution right here. All right, and here is your alternate solution where you just go sine of 40, calculate sine 40, divide it, set it up as 0.673 divided by 1 equals x over 12. Do your cross product, and you end up with an out value of x is equal to 7.7, just like we have practiced over and over again from before. Now pause the video if you have to, rewatch it, and let's begin the next video. So the next question is about a construction company. In a construction company, the pitch of a roof is given by 7 and 12 feet, which means the maximum height of the roof is 7 feet. So imagine that we draw a house. Here's our house, and here's the roof. And it rises a certain amount, and it goes across the thing at a certain amount. So this means that the maximum height of the roof is 7, and the distance from the midpoint. So the maximum is 7 feet, right? Is 7, right? And the distance from the midpoint of the roof, which is right here, to the edge is 12 feet, right? So this means the maximum. So what is the angle of the roof? Okay, so the angle of the roof is always dealing with this corner here, okay? So that corner there with my bearded smiley face tells us that this is our adjacent and this is our opposite to the angle. And remember, when we do these problems, 1, we must draw a diagram or a picture. And then 2, we need to use Sohcahtoa. All right, so we're going to use tangents. So in this case, we've got tan of, let's call it x, because I don't know what the angle is. Let's call it x. Whatever our unknown is x. Just remember it's going to be an angle. So the angle, so TOA means that we're going to use opposite over adjacent. So in this case, we're going to have 7 divided by 12. And 7 divided by 12 gives us 0.583. And we have tan of x. So now what we want to do is we want to get x by itself. So we bring tan to the other side. So we get tan inverse of 0.583. Unless I tell you your final answer for any angle is always going to be to a whole decimal number in this case. So in this case, we're going to write 30 degrees, and that's our angle. So therefore, now the angle of inclination means it's rising up. So therefore, the angle of inclination is 30 degrees. And we're done. Now, your work is posted on the website. I'd like you to try and do those on your own. There will be a certain set of questions that you will submit for work. Use the others for practice.